So it was kind of a breakthrough week. It was kind of a breakthrough week because for the first time, I don't want to say first time, but the first time in this particular moment of my writing life, this new moment as a fiction writer, my name's Asa Merritt. I wrote 6 sermons, a series for Audible. Now I'm writing prose fiction. For the first time in this beat, I wrote some prose that I am really excited by, really feels inspired.
But now, there's new razzmatazz fits like magic. They're made from leg-hugging lycra with 10 specially contoured fit points.
This feels like a really important kind of pivot, perhaps. I'm really hoping it wasn't a one-off kind of moment, but I don't. I think this is kind of the result of a new effort, my new targeted goals, my new dedication of energy towards this fiction moment, and I am trying to pinpoint as specifically as possible what engendered this writing, what gave life to this, what circumstances allowed this kind of fertile, rich, exciting prose to come forth. And as I review the week, I think I can point to a couple of specific things, and that's what I want to share with you. So the first thing that I did this week differently than I've done the other times recently that I've been writing short fiction is that I followed the advice of Joyce Carol Oates, the American short story writer, who recommends that when writing short stories, try, if you can, to write them in one sitting. Try to get through to the end somehow, some way. I wrote this story that I'm excited about over the weekend. I was away, I was in a cabin, which was great. But, I wasn't alone. I was with my family. There was still lots going on. But it was a weekend, which kind of gave me this extended window of time. And I really gave myself that challenge. I sat down at this desk, not this desk, the desk at the cabin, and wrote. And I like to write freehand for my first drafts. And I didn't bring a notebook. So I found this manila folder and wrote and did not stop writing until I finished this story. And I wrote in super small print to make sure I had enough room. And I got to the end, and it really, for the first time, felt like my own work. And I do think part of that was this kind of set aside an entire block of time, knowing that you're going to write the whole story. But I think there were some other elements as well, which are also super exciting.
Do you agree?
Yes, I do. I couldn't describe The Hungry Bath, or to give it its correct title, Le Bain Vorace. It had a French title,
Sorry, I couldn't pronounce it.
as most Australian films of that period did.
The reading piece of it is really starting to pay off. It goes without saying, if you want to write short stories, you got to read them. But what I've found is that to get to this place of originality, or at least perceived originality, it feels fresh, at least to me right now. Even if it's not that I've arrived at this inspired place that I'm kind of excited by my own output, what it took was a kind of more concentrated reading of short stories, specifically breadth. So not only consuming generally to kind of see what the short story form is capable of, but then engaging with sort of competing different alternative voices that really do different things. And through them, it's disrupted my kind of presets, my templates for what a short story could be. And what I realized is that those first 3 stories that I wrote sort of were kind of paint by number-ish type stories. And it really wasn't from a lack of ability or talent. It was really from a lack of exposure, recent exposure to the possibilities of this form. And so I think the takeaway is that, by flooding my creative system with diverse voices, stylistically, thematically, folks writing in different centuries, that all of this input has empowered me to destroy or sort of unpack all the preset ideas of what short stories are that I have in my head, those sort of pat concepts of short stories that I think mostly informed my first attempts, by having this kind of arsenal of Ted Chiang and Stephen Graham Jones and Tanana Rive, as well as sort of theoretical analyses of these short stories. This is this really great book called The Weird and the Eerie about horror fiction. With all that coming in, the walls are breaking down, as it were. And so what happened this week, I think, is again just enough bricks were pushed through that the whole thing kind of fell, and the floodgates are open, and all of a sudden my attempts at short fiction feel from the source, rather than just kind of reconstructing what a short story should be from my knowledge as a reader and a writer. An incredibly exciting week.
And I somehow distrusted the Australian film industry. There seemed to be so many frauds and phonies and people just chasing the money. Australian movies are too slow anyway.
And because I would be remiss to not leave you without a writing tip, I want to talk a little bit about the types of scenes that make good endings and certain kinds of scenes that give you opportunities to tie up loose ends or leave them open, depending on your taste, to kind of finalize relationships or leave them open depending on your taste. But the point is to bring together the elements and characters of your stories in such a way that you can kind of leave us with whatever your intended effect is, as they say in Shakespeare comedies and in weddings and tragedies and in funerals. Ghost Summer, this title novella, the novella story of this Tanana Rive Du collection, does a really kind of cool version of that, where instead of ending at a wedding or a funeral, it ends at a excavation site. And this story is about some young boys who died of racial violence and this young black man who has come to visit his grandparents. And there's a question about where the bodies are buried. These ghosts are haunting the area to this day. And the final scene of the novella brings everyone together around this excavation site where the town has gathered. The backhoe is there. The mayor is there. The last living relatives of these young men who died are there. The white landowners potentially responsible for these deaths are there. Everyone is around this great gaping hole in the ground waiting for the truth to come out or to stay hidden. And I just thought it was a really cool way to elegantly bring together all the elements that this novella was interested in one place, in one dynamic scene. So, excavations. That's my tip as a cool type of scene to bring lots of things together. I'll see y'all next week. Great to have you.
Well, your film career blossomed in the 60s and 70s, especially when you went to England. A few cameo roles with your friends you made there, Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, and all the English.
Yes, mostly cameo roles. Bedazzled, of course, has become a cult movie. It deserves to be, of course, like everything that Peter Cook does.